Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Duran, Marketing and Communications Manager at the American Public Gardens Association, and I will be your staff representative during this virtual conference session. Before we begin, here are a couple of tips to get the most out of your virtual conference experience. First, if you are experiencing poor video or audio quality, we suggest closing other programs on your computer, especially other browser tabs. Your inbox will still be there by the end of the session, I promise. If you have any other problems or questions, association staff are available to help. Give us a call at 610-708-3010 or send us an email at info@publicgardens.org. Second, while this session has been pre-recorded, the presenters are here with us today as panelists and will be happy to take questions in the live question and answer portions of the session. At some point during this session, the presenters may activate a poll. Poll responses are anonymous, so be sure to let us know how you really feel. Finally, you can submit questions using Zoom's Q&A function that you will find in your Zoom toolbar. Questions can be submitted anonymously. You can also upvote other questions to indicate you would like to hear them answered. We will try to answer as many questions as we can during the live Q&A portion of the session. Some questions may be answered directly through the Q&A feature. Thank you and enjoy today's session.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the session on IMLS funding opportunities and strategic priorities. I'm Paula Gangupadhyay, the Deputy Director in the Office of Museum Services. I want to begin by saying that I hope all of you are keeping safe and healthy during these unprecedented times. We wish that we wish you all the best, in the coming days. And hopefully all your museums and the gardens will open very soon and you'll be able to continue the important work that you do for our communities across the nation. This presentation will highlight some of the funding opportunities that gardens and arboretums can apply for. So I will try to go as quickly, but also slowly so that things are clear. And we'll of course leave time for a few questions, in the end. So let's get started. So what is IMLS? If you have never been an applicant, for IMLS, IMLS is the primary source of federal support for the nation's libraries and museums. And when we say museums, it encompasses a broad variety of institutions, museums of all disciplines, art museums, history museums, children's museums, science centers, public gardens, zoos, arboretums, aquaria, a wide variety of museums. But of course, you have to be eligible to apply for IMLS funding. And for that, we encourage you to go to the IMLS website, which lists the eligibility criteria. We are very happy that even in this time, during challenging times, the current level of OMS funding for the FY20 fiscal year is $38 million, over $38 million. So as I always say, that we love to get monies to give monies to support the great work that museums and gardens and all institutions, cultural institutions are doing across the nation. So a quick funding overview from an agency perspective and where the Office of Museum Funding sort of fits in within that. IMLS's annual appropriation in FY20 was $252 million. A bulk of it does go to the Office of Library Services through its grants to state program. So $166,803,000 goes to grants to state libraries and is further disseminated. Of course, many of the state libraries do partner with museums, tribes, and other institutions, but it varies from state to state. And then the library side has a pool of discretionary grants, a little over $28 million. The Office of Museum Services, like I mentioned earlier, is a pool of $38.515 million. So this is just to give you an overview that about approximately 15% of the agency's funding is currently for the museum grant programs. We are always hopeful that that amount will increase with the great work that all of you are doing, and so keep doing that because we need to show the value that our institutions bring. So let me begin by giving you a quick overview of the Office of Museum Services grant programs. And this is very important because these grants are highly competitive and you want to make sure that you are applying in the right pool. The first program that we have is called Museums for America. The acronym that we use is called MFA. And that's where individual museums, if you're a garden and arboretum, that's where you should be applying. I'll go into details about the type of activities that you can apply within that grant program. And many of you may already have, you may have already applied, under this program. We have launched 2 special initiatives, which are currently offered as individual grant programs under MFA. The first one is called Museums Empowered, and this is for professional development of museum staff. And again, I'll go into details about it a little later. This program was launched, I think 3 years ago, and has been extremely popular because unlike the library side where they have a dedicated program called the Laura Bush 21st Century Program, the museum side did not have a dedicated professional development program. And we just feel that, professional development is something that really, should not be compromised. The second program that we launched in 2018 is called Inspire Grant for Small Museums. And this has become extremely popular in the last couple of years. And this is for small institutions. And I'll again go into the details of how do you define, what small is. So we'll go into details about that very soon. The second grant that we have is called National Leadership Grant for Museums. And within that, there are discretionary grants that you can apply for. Again, competitive grants, smaller pool of money, about $8 million. And that is also the pool from where IMLS funds cooperative agreements. And cooperative agreements are special targeted initiatives. If we see a need that is not being met, with the grants that we are giving, like digital technology or diversity and inclusion, that's where we actually partner with a cooperator. It can be an agency, that actually executes the project, for us. So besides Museum for America, Museums Empowered, Inspire Grant for Small Museums, and the National Leadership Grant for Museums, we have 2 relatively smaller grant programs. And first one of that is the Museum Grant for African American History and Culture. And this is a grant that is open to all African American museums across the nation. This grant program was launched at the same time. It's under the same legislation that eventually led to the launch of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And the last grant program we have is called the Native American, Native Hawaiian Museum Programs, and only federally recognized tribes and organizations serving Native Hawaiians, can apply, for that. So again, like a quick overview, one thing I do want to mention before I move on to the next slide is that for the National Leadership Grant, if you're a nonprofit serving botanic, gardens and arboretums, you can apply under the National Leadership Grant. Or if you're a university that is working with botanical gardens and arboretum, the National Leadership Grant is the only pool of money where you can apply. A quick overview, I won't get into details about some of the special initiatives that we have. I know from talking to many of you that many of you have actually benefited from the MAP program or the Museum Assessment Program. That is American Alliance of Museums, or AAM, has been a cooperator, for us for many years. CAP is another program that is for conservation assessment program. So I'm not going to go into details, but this gives you a quick idea about several interagency agreements or special initiatives that IMLS is currently running to address the broader needs of the sector. So I just wanted to give you an idea. I'm sure you're curious to know. So what does the public gardens and arboretums, what do they get out of the funding? So we did a quick scan of the last couple of years, and from 2017 to 19, the approximate number of projects that we have funded is 30. And the approximate funds that have been awarded to public gardens and arboretum has been close to $6 million. And you see here a quick breakdown. And the indicator from 2017 to 19 is that the funding level has actually gone up. It used to be $373,000 in 2017, and last year we awarded close to $3 million, $2,879,000. So kudos to all of you. I'm sure there were some really quality applications that that were proposed, that the reviewers were, rated highly, and they did get funded. So, that's a good indicator. So approximately 16 states were funded, and there were 24 grantee institutions. So a quick snapshot to give you an idea of where the arboretums and the public gardens sort of fall in the funding, schema of IMLS or OMS. Another quick overview of the 16 I mentioned. When I look at this map, I feel that there is tremendous opportunity from the states that are not in dark green. If you are in one of those states that are not in dark green, we urge you to apply. That's always an opportunity, and I hope this sort of gives you a good quick overview. So COVID-19, as we know, I just wanted to mention, by the time this session is taking place, the deadline for the CARES Act grants would have passed. June 12th, was the deadline for that. But IMLS did receive $50 million from the Congress to help institutions address, situations or some of the issues that have come up. 30 million of this 50 million did again go to the grants to state libraries, but again, encouraging them to work with museums and tribes. And then about 15 million of this was made available to museums and libraries. And we hope that, relatively speaking, it may be a small amount, but hopefully it will help at least some aspects of operation. This funding was very specific. It is to help institutions prepare for and respond to the coronavirus, to expand digital network, purchase accessible devices, and provide technical support. So yes, it is very specific to digital, but within the broad legislative mandate, we made sure that there were at least some funding, like plans for reopening, staffing, rehiring, that would help with operational aspects for institutions. So now moving on to a few details about our grant programs that I provided a quick snapshot on. Museums for America, there are 3 project categories that you can apply for: lifelong learning, community anchors and catalysts, and collection stewardship and public access. Your projects can be 1 to 3 years. The funding level is $5,000 to $250,000. So, if you have a smaller project, you want to start small as a pilot, apply for sort of some of the lower level. But if you have a tested idea and, you really want to bring some major change within your institution, you can apply up to $250,000. One thing that is very important, you have to provide one-on-one cost share. Cost share is required. And like I mentioned earlier, only museums can apply for Museums for America. I'm not going to go into detail, but here is a quick example of New Bedford Whaling Museum, and they utilize $143,000 to develop, implement, market, and evaluate a suite of educational programs and resources to complement its new permanent exhibition. So, you can always come to IMLS funding to pay in part for something that's already going on. So here is an example. I mentioned to you about Inspire grant for small museums, and this was carved out specially to support small museums in addressing the priorities in their strategic plan. There was this myth that IMLS is only for large institutions who have grant writers, who have a development department, and we wanted to break that myth because this federal funding is for museums of all types, all disciplines, all across the nation. So again, the categories are lifelong learning, community engagement types of projects, as well as collection stewardship and public access. The amount is smaller. You can apply for $5,000 to $50,000. And the big advantage that we put into this grant to help small museums is that no cost share is required. So you don't have to come up with $50,000 to get $50,000 because we understand that those funding challenges exist. The other less burden aspect of this grant is that we reduce the number of pages of the narrative from 10 pages to 5 pages. So again, we try to do little things that can help institutions of various sizes. And again, for this, only you have to be a museum to apply. Not going to go into details, but again, the Bates Museum utilized $17,000 to provide professional conservation treatment for their natural history specimens and create public programming with their Inspire grant. Museums Empowered, again, professional development and internal capacity building opportunities for museums. This is a program where sometimes institutions are confused because they are so focused on providing professional development for, say, educate or for somebody else. This is not for that. This is for internal professional development of staff. And there are 4 categories that you can apply for: digital technology, diversity and inclusion, evaluation, and organizational management. So again, we intentionally focused it on these areas because we feel that and we've heard this oftentimes from the field, that these are the relevant areas where museums need help. And we all know that professional development is one item that gets compromised in an operational budget. So we want to provide the monies for that, and we've been seeing some phenomenal projects funded through this program. 1 to 3 year project timeline, $5,000 to $250,000, same one-on-one cost share, and only museums can apply. This, I would point out that this is a grant program where if you want to increase diversity and do paid internships, we have many proposals that come in and are getting funded because that is a huge gap in the field, about offering paid internships and increase diversity in our professions. You can apply for internships and fellowships. So that's a broad definition when we say staff professional development. Kentucky Historical Society used $243,000 to completely reshape the institutional culture to provide diversity and inclusion in all facets of its work. It was a cross-cutting, project. National Leadership Grant for Museums. This is very different from the 3 programs that we talked about. This is for addressing critical needs of the sector as a whole. It's this pool of money where a museum association like APGA can come and say, these are the trends and the issues and the gaps that we are seeing in the sector, and we want to address, create tools and resources that are good for multiple institutions or the entire segment of our sector. And so collaboration, cross-department, cross-institutional collaboration is definitely something that we look for. We definitely look for that you have done a thorough needs assessment. And these are pretty large grants. You can apply up to $1 million. We actually increase the caps on these grants a few years ago. So again, there are 5 categories: collections, care, and public access, data analysis and assessment. This is again a need that is continuing. Digital platforms and applications, diversity and inclusion, and professional development. So you can apply in any of these categories if you feel that your project sort of touches on one and multiple of these multiple categories. But we do have a program information sheet where you have to choose one category that is sort of the primary. You can apply for a rapid prototyping project from 5,000 to 50,000. You can apply for research projects. The big advantage with research project is no cost share is required for research projects. And of course, for non-research projects, you can, it can be any other projects. Just quick overview again: museums, universities, museum service organizations, can apply for this grant. Quick project, okay, and so propose a research project to check augmented, how augmented reality museum visits are really affecting guiding families to share in the learning. I'm not going to go into much detail about the African American History and Culture grants and the Native American, Native Hawaiian Museum Services Programs grant. You will have a copy of this PowerPoint. So again, the details are available on this as well as on our website. Very important. Please make sure that you have the DUNS number, the SAM.gov number, and the grants.gov number before you apply. If you don't have these, even if you have a stellar proposal, your project cannot be, your proposal cannot be submitted. So I cannot, reiterate more. All of these applicant components are extremely important. If one is missing, your application will be considered incomplete and will be rejected right at the front end. And the time, I cannot reiterate more. It is 11:59 p.m. Monday, November 16, 2020, as of now, subject to change. It sort of breaks my heart every year to reject applications that have come in 5 minutes late or few seconds late, but so cannot reiterate more. So that sort of concludes my rapid presentation. I'll be happy to take questions from you after this. Thank you and stay well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Duran, Marketing and Communications Manager at American Public Gardens.
Hi, Paula.
Hello.
And everyone. We have several different questions that are in the Q&A, and
Sure.
several of us can also answer more and pose them to you. And if we don't get to them, we'll make sure that you get them afterwards. So
sure. I was just beginning to answer some of the questions, but I'm happy to answer. One of the questions was for the Inspire grants, how do you define small? And we basically ask the applicants to make the case of how they define themselves as small, because as we know, a small historic house museum is very different in scope and scale than a small zoo. So it's basically, you can make the case, you can always cite the data within your sector. So for example, in your case, you can make the case of being small within the public gardens, arboreta sort of ecosystem. And the evaluators or the reviewers are encouraged to always check whether the applicant has actually made the case. So I hope that's helpful. And then we always encourage you to look at some of the examples that we put on our website under the Notice of Funding Opportunities. So if you go to the Inspire NOFO, it'll have a list of 10 or 15 grant applications that have been that have really done a good job in making the case. So we always encourage you to look at that. There was another question. I started to respond to it, and then I think I pressed the send button too fast. When I said that for Museums for America, only museums can apply, What I meant was that, of course, public gardens and arboreta, they can apply because our definition of museums is very broad, and it encompasses, all your institutions as well. So I hope
Yeah,
that's helpful.
I know, Paula, you're always sick of me hearing two terms from me: museum sector business, and that public gardens and botanic gardens are living museums. So
Absolutely.
thanks for paying attention to that.
Yeah, and we are very, very particular about living collections, both, through zoos and, the other arboretums. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Hey, there's one more question I think we have time for before we're going to prepare to help other folks go to our Celebrate Design session, which I hope you'll join us with too, which is a not miss session that starts at 3:50 Eastern, 2:50 Central, 1:50 Mountain, and 12:50 Pacific in Arizona. But Rosie asks about, on the IMLS website, it shows that the deadlines are tentative right now, and when will those deadlines be firmed up? And if you could provide that.
Yeah, so very good question. Every year we aim to launch the NOFO for that year in November. So currently November 16th is the deadline. We always say tentative because it's dependent on our congressional appropriations. So, and this year, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's the reason we use this powerful word called tentative. But we are, doing business as usual. Our NOFOs actually some of the NOFOs have already been approved by the Office of Management Budget. 2 came in approved, today. So, but because it's a single deadline, we are getting them ready, and hopefully they'll be launched in early August.
Fantastic. Okay. And some other questions just about whether or not there needs to be an association sanctioned application by a museum, and that's not true at all. We encourage all our museums to apply either individually. We're happy as an association to write support letters for them, as you know. But then one other one that I hear come up a lot is, does an institution have to go it alone, or can they apply as a partnership of several museums?
So that's a very good question. So for Museums for America, because the projects need to be focused on your institution, you should be applying, for your institution. So that is, you have to submit your strategic plan document, and you have to make the case on how it's going to help your museum, either in the learning category, collections category, or in the community engagement category. Same thing with Inspire. Those are for your individual. National Leadership Grant is the opportunity for you to apply collaboratively. And when I say collaborative, it can be with 2 organizations, or it can be a network of 5 to 10 to 20 institutions. You can also apply as a single applicant. Of course, you'll have to apply as a single applicant, but you can cite various different partners, which can be museums, different associations, as well as some cross-sector partners, which are non-museums, but they can actually help you. So the National Leadership Grant is that category where, you can apply together.
Awesome. Well, that's about all the time we have for our session today. Thank you all for attending with us. Just a reminder that our Celebrate Design session is starting in another virtual room. Thank you very much, Paula, for everything. We have a couple of short informational pieces that'll follow this video if you don't have time to join us or you're interested in some association basic information. So
yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining. And I'll say that I'll try to take the questions that are in the chat Q&A box, and we'll be able to provide the information or the responses to APGA so that they can share it back. But you can always contact our staff, but do know that we received 1,800 applications through our CARES Act grant. So, and that's happening in parallel with decision making on our FY20 application. So if some of you have already applied to our FY20 or the CARES Act grant, keep your fingers crossed and just hope that, the important funding, comes in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello from the United States Botanic Garden in Washington, D.C.
Hello from the Elizabeth River Project.
And Paradise Creek Nature Park in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Hi from the Stump Prairie Garden on the Atlanta Beltline.
Hello from Denver Botanic Gardens. We love our community of public gardens and wish all of you a great conference.
Greetings from Bok Tower Gardens in beautiful Central Florida, where we're recrafting our garden and looking forward to seeing you all in person next year.
Hello from the West Virginia Botanic Garden in Morgantown.
Hello from Birmingham Botanical Gardens in Birmingham, Alabama.
Hi from the BBG.
Hello from Birmingham.
Hello from Birmingham Botanical Gardens.
Hello from Birmingham, Alabama.
Hi, we are so happy to be back at the gardens. Come join us.
At UNC Chapel Hill, spring produce is ready for harvest, but COVID-19 means fewer volunteers to do the work. In our Morning Original, that's the challenge facing their community garden. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a big challenge for leaders of this Carolina community garden.
This has probably been the best spring we've had in years. And so it's like, oh, we have all this food. What can we do with it?
Garden manager Claire Lorch says due to pandemic safety concerns, regular community volunteers are not able to bring in this spring bounty.
We've got spinach, Chinese cabbage, green onions, carrots, radishes, collards, kale.
Now they depend heavily on medical student volunteers like Madeline Hamilton and Lexi Betancourt.
We're, trying to find ways, other than being in the hospital right now, that we could try to help out kind of locally. It's not anything that I've done before, so it's learning a new skill too.
This garden was created 10 years ago to fulfill an important mission to increase food access for university employees.
Ordinarily, the food goes to UNC's housekeepers, all the people that clean the buildings.
Because campus classes and buildings are closed, many housekeepers aren't on the job. To avoid waste, the food is delivered to medical center staff who are working and harder than ever.
They're very appreciative on their end, and we are really happy to be making a tiny contribution to the effort.
Contributing in many different ways. The garden is part of the larger North Carolina Botanical Garden, which is closed for now. However, the trails around the gardens are still open so people can enjoy nature.
The Curlew National Grassland is within the sagebrush steppe community type, which is a huge concern to our partners, the BLM and others. Doing a project like this here makes it where it's on Forest Service lands with the Rocky Mountain Research Station researcher, but it applies to a huge area that may not be a lot of the National Forest Service system, but it is within the sage-grouse habitat area where we manage.
And so on the Curlew, what we're doing is testing the concept of forb island plantings. Forb islands are areas that plants can spread from, and so you can treat a smaller area, but maybe actually are able to treat a larger area by both the interaction with the pollinators that come in to be on those plants, and then also those plants can serve as a seed source for further population growth. The addition of the biochar is a way to help establish those forb islands. And so in this case, what we're going to do is use plugs to plant, and then we're using the biochar because we believe the biochar will help in that plug establishment. One of the most important things about restoration is to actually have kind of a real-world proof of concept or demonstration area. And so it's important to work with managers at national grasslands and in forests. I think it's very important to have these restoration projects to tie into the bigger picture. And we can do a lot of work, all hands, all lands, across agencies to help preserve our landscape.
So I feel doing things on the grassland here and making sure we do it in such a way that it's shared has a wider application to restoration as a whole.